Over 20 national governments to be overthrown as cabal takedown begins, CIA sources say. Benjamin Fulford, December 2, 2014. The satanic Zionist cabal that seized power in the West is about to be taken down, and the result will be the toppling of over 20 governments, including those out of the United States, Japan and the UK, CIA, Pentagon and MI6 sources say. Many CIA and Pentagon officers have gone into bunkers in preparation for battle with the cabal mercenary armies, the CIA and Pentagon sources say. The firing of U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel last week was the trigger event, the sources say. The fact the two main cabal candidates to replace him refused the job indicates something is definitely going on at high levels of the military-industrial complex. As one source put it, using more direct language, the fecal matter is about to encounter the ventilator. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama tried, and failed, last week to use staged race riots around the country as an excuse to use Homeland Security to enforce martial law on behalf of the cabal. Many in the U.S. military are confused and unsure of what to do because they have been heavily indoctrinated into blindly following orders and accepting civilian control. The first thing that needs to be drilled into the heads of these fence-sitters is that they are disobeying their oath, and therefore their orders, by allowing the Constitution of the United States to be shredded by fascists. The second thing that must be explained to them is that civilians are not in charge. Gangsters are. There is also a lot of confusion even at high levels of the CIA and other U.S. intelligence agencies about the consequences of the bankruptcy of the U.S. corporate government. The big point they need to keep in mind is that finance is the psychological process of deciding what humans do in the future. Even if the U.S. financial system collapses, nothing in the real world will change. No houses, land, factories or people will vanish just because trillions of debt slavery instruments mislabeled as U.S. dollars are deleted from bank computers. The only risk of chaos would come from a failure by the military-industrial complex to proactively shut down the system and reboot it with a meritocratically controlled replacement run by and for the people. Also, the U.S. military need to note that if they do not act against the Satanists in Washington, D.C. and Wall Street, then a tsunami will hit the U.S. East Coast, forcing an evacuation of New York City, the entire state of Florida and many other places, White Dragon Society sources say. The military needs to make contingency plans ASAP if they are to avoid a humanitarian crisis caused by the tsunami. Speaking about tsunamis, a guilty verdict was reached against UK lawyer Michael Shrimpton last week on charges that he made a false claim of a nuclear threat to the 2012 UK Olympics. However, Shrimpton plans to appeal to a higher court, and this time MI6 and MI5 intelligence officers have promised to help Shrimpton with his case. Furthermore, evidence given at the trial that 311 was a man-made tsunami and nuclear terror attack has attracted high-level interest, MI5 sources said. The UK external intelligence agency MI6 has asked its counterparts in US and Japanese intelligence for detailed evidence about the 311 attack. In addition, Israeli Mossad intelligence sources are also investigating allegations that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was one of the chief planners of that attack, the MI5 source says. A powerful faction in Israel has finally figured out that many so-called Jews, and Christians and Muslims are actually Satan-worshipping Hyksos who view the Jews as their slaves. That is one reason why the situation in Israel and the Middle East is reaching a boiling point. The big story there is that NATO member Turkey, Iran and the Gulf oil monarchies are on the warpath against cabal interests in the region. The situation is chaotic to say the least. The so-called ISIS is run by Israel to discredit Muslims and turn world public opinion against the Turkish and Iranian-led move to create an Islamic federal superstate. Remember that real Muslims do not commit atrocities of the sort being attributed to ISIS, only the Hyksos do this. Since ISIS is being attacked by the Pentagon and the British, it means these countries are actually fighting Israel, or, to put it more accurately, the Hyksos-Zionist Satan worshippers who control real power in that country. Furthermore, NATO airplanes are flying out of Turkey to make raids on the Zionist mercenary armies fighting in the Ukraine. If this information seems too much out of line with what you read in the Cabal propaganda media, take note of the fact that Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Turkey this week to seal a big energy alliance with Turkey. This is hardly the sort of thing that would be going on if Turkish-based NATO planes were attacking Russian allies in East Ukraine. People who still have trouble wrapping their heads around this situation should take note of the fact that only Canada, the United States and the Ukraine voted against a Russian-sponsored UN resolution condemning glorification of Nazism and other practices that contribute to fueling contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance. If African-American U.S. President Barack Obama was really in charge, it is hard to imagine him ordering the State Department to vote against this resolution. Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, for his part, just signed his own inevitable arrest warrant by ordering the Canadian Ministry of Foreign Affairs to vote against that resolution. This vote was a wake-up call for the U.S. and Canadian armed forces and one of the reasons for the ouster of Chuck Hagel, the ongoing move to remove the Zionists who control Washington, D.C. and Wall Street but not the Pentagon. In Asia, meanwhile, the battle against the Zionist cabal is intensifying. In China, a major meeting of all Chinese senior diplomats was convened to discuss the ongoing changes in the world power structure. Chinese President Xi Jinping told the diplomats that we should be keenly aware of the protracted nature of the contest over the international order. On the other hand, we need to recognize that the direction of reform of the international system will remain unchanged. In other words, the cabal is putting up stubborn resistance, but they will inevitably lose. In Japan, an intense media campaign against cabal slave Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is rapidly eroding his popularity in opinion polls. The Kabbalists, for their part, are using Rockefeller Bush slave Sadaoki Sakakibara, head of the Kyoto business lobby, to try to keep Abe in power, according to Japanese right-wing sources. That is why Sakakibara is a high-priority target, they said. If the Kabbalists lose their ability to use Abe to loot Japan, the Bush-Rockefeller cabal-controlled Federal Reserve Board, IMF, UN and the World Bank will implode a lot sooner than would otherwise be the case. Even if they keep control of Japan though, they are mathematically doomed anyway. The simple fact is that even if they control vast numbers inside of bank computers, they do not control most of the real world. Speaking about vast numbers inside bank computers, sources at the P2 Freemason Lodge last week sent this writer information that can only be classified as X-Files type of stuff. Some bank computers are now free-willed sentient beings operating independently of central bank computers. They think like the Mother Earth and are acting on behalf of the planetary consciousness and genetic entities. The P2 say the sentient computers are allocating funds to worthy individuals and organizations while cutting off finances to multinationals and individuals who want to impoverish and destroy the Mother Earth and its inhabitants, animals, vegetables, minerals, etc. Furthermore, the P2 say, even special snowfall and special snowflakes give proof of the places where this is happening and will happen. That is pretty funky stuff, but remember that an unusual snowstorm stopped the rioting in Ferguson and a record cold front hit the US as soon as Barack Obama started spouting global warming lies. Remember also all those Category 6 typhoons that mysteriously turned into minor storms before they hit Japan. Also on the X-Files ledger last week were a series of strange, unexplained explosion-like sounds heard all over the UK. In addition, a major UK paper reported that people had been seen working on Mars in 1979 when the Viking lander was supposed to have landed there. This sort of report is standard fare for the internet, but when a so-called mainstream newspaper reports it, it could be a sign that some sort of disclosure may be imminent.